what I suggest you do is, all of us have kind of this, let me turn a little bit, this receding spot in our hairline. And that is almost always right at C3 and C4. So from my standpoint, what I do is I take this little pinky finger and I come straight across right where this receding hairline is. And with this finger, I made a part. And it makes it real easy to then go ahead and put that sensor on there. Now, some people will take a clip and, clip up their hair and things like that. Personally, what I do is, once I have that sensor on my head, then I take the rest of this hair and I put it over top of it and push the sensor down. Surprisingly, it does not stick to my hair. I'm able to just pull up that whole chunk of hair again at the end, and it's there. So it's not, that part of it is not a problem or an issue at all. So that might be an easier way for you to do that. Even when I'm hooking somebody else up, everybody just has that little area of receding, and it really is right along there. Now, the only other thing you have to be careful of is this funky little thing in our ear. That is where the sensor should be in direction with. So as long as you are somewhere up here, then you just want to make sure that you're going straight up from there. And so you're not going off to one side or anything like that. You're just going straight up. And then you'll have exactly where you want it to be. It really is, to me at least, the simplest way to do it. Now we're going to show you how to get the sensor out a little easier in a moment, so that you don't have any paste left in your hair. The easiest way to do this is to very carefully make sure that these are not tight around, but hold these out far enough that you can then take your other hand and wrap them around, and then that leaves these they're nice and loose, and you're not going to break off a sensor in the middle of it or anything like that. This is the easiest way to actually carry your Z-amp around with you. If for some reason you feel you'd rather this go into like a baggie or little plastic bag of some sort, just make sure that there's no moisture in there when you put them in, because if there's any moisture, then the springs on your sensors are going to get all rusty and icky, and you really don't want these to get all rusty. Now, the other thing that is really important to take note of is the active sensors, the yellow ones that go on the scalp. The thing is the wire that's in this is very, very, very delicate. And so when you put this on your head, that's one of the reasons why you put all of the clip-ons first, is because it's added weight. And if you don't put these on first, then it's just going to pull this right off. So, but when you put this on, the easiest way to do it is to put, this has got paste on it. You're going to put it on like that. And that's when I drop my hair and then push that down, so that I don't get paste all over my finger. And it's not that I hate paste on my finger, it's that it sticks to your finger and you can almost pull it right back off again. So you don't want to do that. And that also stops you from doing one of these things. If you have your thumb on it and your finger, I'm trying to get it out of the way. But if you're doing this type of a thing, then what ends up happening is that you break off the little wires that are in there, and you'll just go through your sensors faster. Most of us, Zindar says that you can get 100 sessions out of one set of sensors. You could very easily not take care of your sensors and get far less than that out of them. You could also take really good care of your sensors and get far more out of it. So Mark and I usually could get, we sometimes could double that and get 200 sessions out, but it really, really, really was important that we were very careful with our sensors. We wiped them down with an unscented baby wipe. When we were finished with them every day, we would just wipe all of it down, so there was no paste that was sticking to anything, which, by the way, just kind of having an office, it really is nice for people to come into your office and not see paste all over your chair and not see paste all, these things all sticky and as though they've been used over and over and over again, and then you're going to use them in their hair as well. And while I'm on my little soapbox here, the other thing that you also might want to consider is that the earbuds, they still will carry bacteria. And so sharing those is not always the best thing to do. So personally, I would either ask your clients, got these all wrapped up funny. I would either ask your clients to bring in their own earbuds, or I'd ask, or every time you every time you start a new client, just go ahead and buy a set, a decent set of earbuds with them. Most of the time they're paying enough that you can, just work that into what you're doing with them. And I think that that's really the easiest way to do it. Now, Mark and I never used earbuds. Just very, very rarely would we use a headset if we were working with two teenagers at the same time and working on some social pragmatics, or just kind of that communication difficulty that some teenagers have. So we would do some of those things, but we would never, for the most part, anytime anybody came in, it was just that surround sound and the just everything that we were doing in the office. I mean, we didn't have a lot of other processes or anything like that going on, but we always just let it all go out and into the air. And we usually sat in the office with them, and that usually was never an issue or a problem. See how the paste is coming over the sensor? Now, this is not a flat sensor, this is a cup sensor, so it's one of the older ones, but that's okay. You really want the paste to be able to come out all the way around. You don't want any metal touching the head. And so as long as you've got enough paste on there, then it's easy to get it out without leaving too much. Now, if you don't have enough, then the warmth of the head will melt the paste, and that's very difficult. It's just hard to get much out because it's already melted and into the scalp. Hooking your client up. There is a difference between hooking yourself up and hooking your client up. My own personal opinion is I usually will go into the restroom and look in the mirror. It usually is easier for me to hook myself up if I'm in the restroom and just using the mirror. You certainly do not have to do that. Some people are able to do it just by the feel. And I can do that. It's not that I couldn't do that. And I could only do it by the cold touch of the paste. But I find that I have less paste left in my hair if I go into the mirror and I see that I really do have it on the part that I've created instead. And so for me, it's more, not really vanity, but more cleanliness. I to do a session in the morning and have the paste in my hair all day long is a little bit of a burden for me. So I just assume go ahead and get it out as quickly as I can. And so that makes it a little easier for me. Finding C3 and C4, what I'm going to suggest is that one is fine. It's the exact same location as what it would be if you went with that little receding hairline area and went straight back and right above that funky little thing in your ear. So either way is whichever is the easiest for you. What you do not have to do anymore, because the placement is not that critical. The critical part is making sure it's on your scalp. But finding C3 and C4 is not that critical. If you're a little bit off one way or the other, and this is on the quiz, so if you're a little bit off one way or the other, it doesn't really matter. So, but we used to have to measure it out, and you'd find that funky little bump in the back of your head. You'd go from the very center of your nose and you'd come halfway, and that's CZ. Then you'd go from CZ down to that funny little place in your ear, and you'd do half of that, and that was C3, C4. So, I mean, we used to have to be very specific, and especially when we were doing research. But, you know, for all of us, if you get close to C3, C4, you're fine. It's not a problem. Paste amount we've talked about, just more is better. Now, if they were clear out here and it was all the way around that, you have to remember that this is conductive paste. It's measuring everything that the paste is touching. So you don't want paste touching another metal. That would not be good, because it's going to then make one big noisy area instead. So you really want to make it so that the paste goes over top of the sensor. It's just outside of the sensor range, but it's not all, you know, it's not a quarter size. You know, we're just talking about this size. If it's, you know, if it really is too little, it will melt. NeurOptimal assumes the sensor's on the head. Now, that sounds silly, but remember yesterday when I said if you didn't attach the sensors and they were just hanging there, the NeurOptimal software program is a mathematical program, and it's going to go through the same mathematical process, whether it is attached to your head, the cat's head, your foot, or dangling in the air. It has a job, and the job is to go through that mathematical process for 33 minutes. Now, with that, we know that when our brain is getting that information and that information is accurate to what we just produced, then we pay attention to it. And it's important to us, and it brings us back to present. And so it turns out to be very helpful to us to have it on our scalp while we're doing a session. The only other thing that sometimes people forget, I mean, hopefully they remember to put the sensors on their head, but the other thing is that sometimes they will push play instead of record. That doesn't happen very often anymore, just because of the way the program is set up, but it still can happen. So when someone says, I don't know that I'm really making much progress, the first thing to look at is, were you recording it every single time, or were you playing it back to them? You know, if you recorded it the first time or two, and then the next few times all you're doing is playing it back, well, that could be a problem. So you want to make absolutely sure that you're really honestly going through the record, as well as making sure the sensors are on the head. Let's just go through this real quick though. Positioning and location. Again, we've talked about C3, C4. I'm going to show you how we remove sensors. For cleaning them, what we have found is a couple of things. For the flat sensors, they are so easy to clean. You know, just a little alcohol swab or, you know, something like that is real easy. You can dip them in boiling water, and that's not a problem, as long as it's just dip, dip, swish, and get them right back out, and then hang them to dry real quick. Don't wrap them in anything. Don't wrap them up with paste still on them. Make sure that you get off as much paste as you can right away. Otherwise, it'll start to pit the silver that's on the sensors. Mark, did you have something you want to talk about?
Now would be a good time to talk about just what these different wires are doing.
Okay.
It's always a question about where you hook them up and what they do. And there's only just the one black wire. And the reason there's only one is that, you know, it's just one electrical system, so just we're able to ground it just with one side. So that needs to be at least somewhere on the body, typically on that right lower lobe is the place that we have it. But what's happening with the yellow and the blue, what we call the active is the yellow, and the blue is the reference. The active one, of course, is the one that's up on C3, C4, the yellow wire if you're using the Zengar sensors. And that's the one, obviously, that is actively picking up the cortical activity. Okay. But the issue with that is, one, that's a minute amount of cortical activity. You know, we don't have electricity just shooting out of our heads. That's why it's important to use a conductive paste and all that discussion. But what's happening really is that, after we've picked up that cortical activity, we've got a 36 to 40-inch wire hanging out into what we've already discussed is a very electrically dirty environment that we live in now. Okay, so way back when I was in high school and college, we used to tape things onto our wires like this onto our rabbit ears and stretch them across our bedroom or our dorm room to increase the amount that we were pulling out of the air. So what's happening is that we're getting this little bit of cortical activity, plus we're getting all of this outside noise, and that's what's getting into the to the Z amp down the active lead. What the reference one is doing is we're putting that at the top of the ears at a relatively low / non-existent place to pick up cortical activity. Okay, we're just out on that cartilage, and it's not conducting anything through our ears and up there. So this one is getting basically no cortical activity. It's the same length. It's bound with that active one, so it's following the same path, with the assumption that it's picking up approximately and nearly exactly the same amount of outside interference, outside artifact, outside noise, whichever way you want to look at it. And so the first part of denoising that's happening within the Z amp is calculating basically the voltage drop between yellow and blue. Make sense, I hope? So, the blue reference sensor isn't there to pick up cortical activity. It's there for the active lead to reference for that first stage of denoising. So that's why it's important to put them all on, and a good answer for, you can shorten that a great deal when your client asks, well, why do I have to have 5 of these on my head? So.
Yeah, I know we always get the question about, is there something else we could use? And at this point in time, no. That doesn't mean that there won't be, and it doesn't mean that we aren't excited about the fact that maybe there will be something different someday, but not right now. Okay, so here we are. This is our daughter, Lizzie. Thank you, Lizzie, for taking care and volunteering here to have a sensor put on you. I want to show you real quick. Do you mind holding that, sweetie? Thanks. And I'll just take one of these yellow ones. I'm not going to do all of them, guys. I'm only going to show you the active sensor. Sorry, I tell you, kids put up with so much with their parents, don't they? What we do is we get a good amount of paste on the sensor. So I'm going to show you the good amount of paste. That's enough that once I put it on her scalp, it's going to spread. All right. I'm going to look at where her little receding area is. I'm going to take that pinky finger because it works really, really, really well to do this with. Lizzie, I'm going to ask you to turn your head just a little bit. She's got that funky little spot right here. I'm going to go straight up from that. And now it's on the head. I haven't pushed it down. I'm going to go ahead and put her hair back over top of it and then push it down. Now that's enough that it will stick. I did not have to do this to make it stick. And when I'm ready, we've done the music, la 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 la, it's all finished. And I'm going to come back up here again. Now this is where it's really interesting. Lizzie, I'm going to try to move you up just a little bit more. There we go. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull out every single little bitty hair that we possibly can pull out. And then down here with this thing, I'm going to get as close to the top of this sensor as I can. And I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to go up and down, around and around in circles. And little by little, I'm just going to pull this all the way out. When I do that, it's left almost everything on here. What I ended up with again, Lizzie, if you don't mind just turning your head just a little bit, is just barely, barely, barely a little bit of residue. And a baby wipe will just take that right out. And then that's it. And it's all done. Now, we do have a little video that shows you this as well. But it takes all the big chunks out. Now, there still may be a little bit of residue there. But at least you could go back to work, you go back to school, you could do anything and everything that you needed to do, and it would not, it wouldn't be bothering you at all that way. All right, Lizzie, how awesome are you? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was really helpful. All right, so that's what we do. That's how we are able to put a sensor on, take it off, and get it out of there without leaving too much. Now, we do have a tiny little video, again, very, very short. I'm also looking at this and realizing there's a couple of things I did not mention here that I should probably do. One is storing the sensors. Again, we talked about that a little bit. Just don't put wet sensors in plastic bags or anything like that. If you have to take your Z-amp back and forth, then I would wrap it the way we showed you and just put it into your computer bag and take it home. If you don't, then the other thing we do is we'll set it up here and let them just dangle down. And that's just enough that they'll dry and there's no problem with them just kind of hanging there. And so that's where we usually have just left ours at the end of our work day. So just hanging on a bookshelf or something. Replacing your sensors, you need to replace your sensors as soon as the silver starts to come off the tip of the sensor, or if you have accidentally broken a wire, and typically it's noticeable when you break a wire. It's possible that could be kind of midline down the track of the actual wire. You could break an interior wire. If that's the case, then more than likely what you'd see is popping on and off. You'd see information, on mirror matrix, you just see things that they're there and then they're gone, then they're there, then they're gone, and that's probably just a short in the wire someplace. So that would be a sign that you probably need new sensors. Mark showed you yesterday how to null the sensors, so you've already kind of gone through that. I always had at least one, if not more, spare sets of sensors. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One is that you never know when you're going to break a sensor, and you don't want the sensor, you don't want to be without one when a client comes in the door. But the other part to that is that a lot of times, if you are at a point where you're really helping other people get started and you've helped them purchase a system, or if you have rental systems or anything like that, you may have people that want to buy a set of sensors from you instead of from Zengar, and not because of any other reason than they just don't want to wait for the sensors to get in, and they know that you live close or you're nearby or whatever, and so they'll come to you instead. So we usually would have 3 to 5 sets of sensors setting aside all the time. And it was just enough that we were able to, help people if they need it. If we didn't need them, they're not doing any, it's not a problem for them hanging out at our house instead of, on the shelf at Zengar's. So it worked out really well that way. All right, let's real quick see this little bitty taking the sensors out. They do it a tiny bit different than I do, but both work.
Okay, so this is just a demonstration of how to remove the sensor to get as little paste left in the hair as possible. So this is a sensor here. So one of the most important things is to always make sure that you get all the hair out of the way of the paste. So you've got a really clean view of the sensor and the paste. And then just sort of grab the bottom of the wire here and just sort of tug it off, and you'll see that the paste comes off, and then you can just wipe the hair with a wipe, and there's no paste left. Thank you.
I think one of the things that's really important, not only did she make sure she got all of the hair out of the way, but she pulled that hair really tight. And so then when I call it weenie, I don't know whether that's not a good word probably, but when you move it back and forth and up and down and around, I just kind of weenie it back out of there. And so that, to me, for the most part, I rarely left any paste in somebody's hair, unless again it was a child that just was moving and there's no way that you could take the time to get it out of their hair that way. But honestly, most of those children really didn't care that it was in their hair either. So there you have it.